Our next speaker, Teresito Lozano, is currently an assistant professor in musicology at the University of Texas, Rio-Grande Valley. A native of the El Paso, Texas, Ciudad Juarez, and Chihuahua borderland, she engages in research that explores the relationship between music, migration, religion, history, and cultural memory. She is a former graduate fellow of the Smithsonian Institution's Latino Museum Studies program, and in 2018 was awarded the prestigious Charlotte Newcomb Doctoral Dissertation Fellowship for research centered on religion and ethics.
Okay, perfect. Okay, excellent. All right.
So did we start computer sound?
Yes, we did. All right. So what does one envision when thinking of the typical ghost story? Terrifying suspense, chilling narratives, macabre details meant to elicit fear in the listener, or perhaps, as Dr. Avila was talking about, the legendary Mexican tale of La Llorona, cautionary tales and malevolent spiritual encounters that encourage listeners to abide by moral codes. But what if I were to tell you a different ghost story? One that instead of fear evokes hope. One that perhaps might make you question the validity of socially constructed or government-sanctioned moral codes. A ghost story that forms part of a complex religious devotion and the cultural memory of persecution. Since the early 2000s, this particular ghost story has been encoded and retold in a series of corridos, or Mexican traditional ballads, limited to a very specific listening community of undocumented Mexican migrants and devotees. These ballads tell the story of contemporary migrant trans-border encounters with the ghost of Saint Toribio Romo, a 27-year-old priest and a Catholic martyr killed in Jalisco nearly 100 years ago. According to migrants, Santo Toribio Romo has been adopted as the unofficial patron saint of immigrants, specifically called El Santo Coyote, or the Holy Smuggler. It's from this title and central theme in the collection of corridos dedicated to and about Saint Toribio and his miraculous intercessions that led me to define the genre ghost smuggling ballads. He appeared as if part of a dream, one migrant survivor stated. This man with piercing blue eyes, dressed in black, suddenly stood before me when I feared I only had a few more hours to live from my lack of water and shelter. The desert doesn't care who you are. She will swallow you whole, or if not, the bandidos will. He saved me. I still don't know if I was dreaming or not. Another testimony states, he was tall. He drove a pickup truck and pulled up beside me as I laid on the ground, forcefully shaking my young boy awake to keep him from dying. I will never forget those blue eyes, staring so intently that I felt a strange sensation come over me. He healed my son with his hands, gave us money and directed us to go where we needed to. The Holy Coyote. I had no idea we'd been blessed by God until I realized who he was months later. It was him. It was Toribio. I'm a believer now, and I'm always telling other migrants to pray to him. Encounters with Saint Toribio vary from migrant to migrant, evidenced by the diverse narratives within the corridos dedicated to telling their story. However, there are several overarching themes that frame these ballads into a collective tale. Ghost smuggling ballads depict the migrant journey in the trans-border region, the liminal space of thousands of miles of desert that stretch along the US-Mexico border. They redefine the role of the coyote, or the smuggler figure, one who is notoriously untrustworthy, dangerous, yet necessary as a guide through the undocumented border crossing process, into a source of trust and sanctity. Rather than being sung as part of public performance, or as at the physical location of Saint Toribio's holy shrine in Santana de Guadalupe in Jalisco, these musical narratives are shared primarily as informal videos on social media, specifically YouTube. Migrants share testimonies of their near-death experiences, miraculous intercession, and journey of survival to permeate the physical and geopolitical barrier into the United States. Oftentimes, migrants have no idea who Toribio Romo is when he appears suddenly to rescue them, let alone that they're being saved by an apparition of a man who was killed during the Cristero Rebellion in 1928, back in the highlands of central Mexico. Based on migrant testimony in corridos, when migrants ask how they can repay their generous trans-border savior for his help, Saint Toribio Romo tells them that once they're able to secure safe passage, they can return to Santa Ana de Guadalupe in Jalisco and ask the townspeople to direct them to a man named Toribio Romo. It is upon this pilgrimage back to Mexico that migrants become aware that they were indeed saved by a ghost. The following corrido, entitled Nueva Vida, which is accompanied by amateur video footage reenacting the corrido narrative, tells the story of a migrant and his pregnant wife who goes into labor in the desert. When the migrant runs ahead to find a migrant caravan to help him, he returns to find that his wife has safely delivered her baby with the help of a mysterious figure who healed her. She said, "He left his name, Toribio Romo, inscribed in my heart. He saved our lives."
Su mano en mi frente y una paz desconocida con sus manos me curaba y nos salvaba la vida. Aquí me dejó su nombre escrito en mi corazón. Se llama Toribio Romo, dijo ser siervo de Dios.
So the few scholars who have discussed Saint Toribio Romo and his role as a holy coyote focus on mass pilgrimage to a shrine in Jalisco, the milagros or votives left as offerings in a room next to his chapel, and the increasing transnational devotion among Mexicans and Mexican Americans in both Mexico and the United States. However, no scholar to date has compiled or analyzed the collection of musical testimonies that document the Holy Coyote's apparition and transborder miracles. Between 2014 and 2019, I collected nearly 20 ghost smuggling ballads dedicated to or about Saint Toribio Romo as part of my doctoral dissertation research, exploring their significance to the migrant community as well as to his devotees. Almost all of Saint Toribio Romo corridos in my compilation are exclusively found on YouTube, which is where I first encountered the aforementioned video, Nueva Vida. YouTube serves as an invaluable digital archive for my ongoing study. The scope of my work centers on my analysis of lyrical content, the inherent migrant testimonies of transborder survival, and the dramatic reenactment footage that accompanies select performances in the compilation. The cultural implications of this collective ghost story weave together an inherited culture of Mexican balladry, cultural memories of religio-political rebellion from the 1920s, and a resignification of the migrant journey, ascribing the role of the human smuggler with a sacred mission that sanctifies the undocumented journey. So who exactly was Toribio Romo Gonzalez, and who is Saint Toribio Romo? Father Toribio Gonzalez was a 27-year-old priest killed by agrarian and federal soldiers in Tequila, Jalisco, which is in fact a real place, during La Cristiada, or the Cristero Rebellion, the armed religious revolt of Cristeros against the Mexican government between 1926 to 1929. Cristeros are best described as militant Catholic rebels who, in response to the enforcement of the 1917 Mexican Constitution's anti-clerical laws and perceived encroachment on religious liberties, participated in an armed uprising, fought most intensely in West and Central Mexico, particularly the state of Jalisco. After he died, Toribio Romo remained relatively unknown outside of the state of Jalisco, save for families who descended from Cristeros and were familiar with its cultural, religious, and historical significance. Toribio Romo was canonized in May of 2000 by Pope John Paul II, alongside other Cristero martyrs. While the church recognizes Saint Toribio as a saint who was executed while fulfilling his religious duties, he has never been recognized as a patron saint of immigrants. Rather, through circulating testimonies dating back to 2002, some of which actually speak of miraculous events dating as far back as the early 1980s, Saint Toribio Romo has received a secondary canonization, one bestowed upon him not by the church, but specifically by the migrant community. In fact, his growing devotion is evidenced by the thousands of migrants, pilgrims, who return to pay him homage at his shrine in Santa Ana de Guadalupe in Jalisco. Many pilgrims who visit Saint Toribio's shrine will also visit the Milagro room, a room filled with items associated with their personal story of miraculous intercession or with their petitions for protection. Some of these votives include photographs, locks of hair, notes and letters, old medical equipment, American license plates, original artwork, and small medallions. For migrants yet to make the second half of the migrant pilgrimage back to Mexico, or for migrants who simply will never acquire the means of returning without risking the ability to re-enter the US, corrido composition offers a unique and intangible platform within which they can express musical votives, transforming YouTube and other social media sites into digital altars for the Holy Coyote. Whereas the Milagro Room in Santa Ana de Guadalupe allows future migrants and petitioners to view the multitude of religious artifacts left by other migrants, YouTube allows migrants to share their story of their encounters with the ghost, uninhibited by any physical barrier or travel limitation. Although Mexico's emblematic ballad tradition, the corrido, saw its peak compositional and performance period during the years surrounding the Mexican Revolution, migration and border crossing narratives have been preserved in corrido texts dating back to the 19th century. Ghost smuggling ballads hail from intersecting histories of the border corrido, the Mexican Revolutionary corrido, the post-revolutionary cristero corrido, and migrant corrido traditions, all of which form part of the overarching ballad tradition of what renowned corrido scholar Americo Paredes defines as Greater Mexico. Corridos from the Mexican Revolution and post-revolutionary period, which does include the Cristero Rebellion, relay narratives containing social political commentary, oral history, epic tales of heroes and outlaws and political villains, and diverse themes of smuggling, violence, religious conflict, protest, and migration. Most significantly, St. Toribio Romo corridos form part of an over century-long history of migration-themed corridos that predate the Mexican Revolution, dating back to the 19th century border corrido and its themes of border conflict along the Rio-Grande Valley in what became South Texas. The themes of migrant corridos since the 20th century have developed into autobiographical narratives that express the collective struggle of the Mexican migrant, including themes of protest against unjust laws, deportation, mistreatment of migrant workers, and a fight against socioeconomic despair among the migrant community in the US. While many migrant corridos have been brought into the Mexican and Mexican-American collective conscious through public performances and commercialized music by groups such as Los Tigres del Norte, ghost smuggling ballads are informally published and shared with the migrant community on social media. In fact, during my fieldwork, when I attempted to capture live performances of these ballads, I was met with an unexpected silence, consequently leading me back to the social media where I originally encountered them. The following corrido, however, by Los Originales de San Juan, is one of only 2 ghost smuggling ballads available as commercial music, along with another corrido that only recently made its way to availability on Spotify. This reinforces the fact that YouTube has become the center for uploading, sharing, and consuming ghost smuggling ballads within the migrant survivor and future survivor listening community. One of the most interesting characteristics of this particular ghost smuggling ballad is the fact that it's the only non-narco corrido the group has recorded in its entire repertory, meaning that it's the only non-drug themed related ballad, which opens a new avenue for research on the intersection of St. Toribio's patronage of migrants and the culture of folk saint devotion within the narco community. I note that folk saints such as Jesus Malverde and La Santa Cecilia, or La Santa Muerte, excuse me, not Santa Cecilia, in addition to the secondary canonization ascribed to St. Jude, form part of the narco hagiography, or collection of saints and protectors. Is perhaps St. Toribio Romo among them? So I just want to play a little snippet of this particular corrido. A little bit more lively than the other one. If I can, or maybe I can't. Okay, I'm going to sing it then. It goes, todos tenemos un santo, o alguien a quien adorar, la Santa Muerte o San Judas, o la Virgen de San Juan, Malverde o Toribio Romo, el patrón del ilegal. El padre Toribio Romo nació y fue muerto en Jalisco, lo matan los agraristas por ser seguidor de Cristo. Desde entonces se aparece, mucha gente ya lo ha visto, por el río Bravo y su chate, por el desierto traicionero, ahí lo salva de peligro ese santo misionero. Cuentan que a veces les da agua, comida y dinero. Okay. That was unexpected. All right, so Los Originales de San Juan's corrido is more of a general informative corrido about Saint Toribio Romo's intercessions, which differs from the next corrido narrated in the first person about a smuggler's encounter with Saint Toribio Romo. Migrant accounts in corridos that reinforce Saint Toribio's role as the Holy Coyote position the smuggler's role as central to the undocumented pilgrimage. In Mexican and Mexican-American folklore and literature, the coyote character, including both the predatory desert animal and the human smuggler, appears frequently as the archetypal trickster, the ultimate deceiver. The smuggler is notorious for extorting migrants by charging exorbitant fees and often abandoning migrants in the desert. Once abandoned, migrants are vulnerable not only to the elements, but to dangerous encounters with vigilantes, border thieves and rapists, and border patrol. However, Saint Toribio Romo, the Holy Coyote, prevents such encounters and charges migrants nothing, save for asking them to return to a shrine in Jalisco in Thanksgiving, an expression of religious devotion. Rather than the archetypal deceiver and vessel of distrust, Saint Toribio Romo is a protector and source of divine trust. According to migrant belief, he is sent directly by God to intercede and ensure the undocumented journey is safe and successful. Saint Toribio Romo is also a source of entrusting. Families who have already become aware of Saint Toribio Romo's patronage entrust their loved ones to him and preemptively visit his shrine to seek his blessing and invoke his protection, as is the case with a few corridos that I encountered. However, as evidenced by the following corrido, Saint Toribio Romo also intercedes for fellow coyotes and even converts and transforms them to his particular mission of protecting migrants and helping secure their safe passage to the US and subsequently back to Mexico. According to Saint Toribio Romo's mission, the coyote is a smuggler capable of good, not a figure of illicit activity, violence, or apathy to the human condition. So the following corrido is called El Cascabel, which means the rattle or rattlesnake. It sheds a different light on the patronage of the Holy Coyote, narrating the encounter of Jesse Rey, a self-employed smuggler who joins a corrupt band known for abandoning migrants, and after securing payment, leaving them in the hands of a corrupt smuggling ring. One particular day, after collecting his profit from a group of vulnerable migrants and leaving them behind, Rey is bitten by a rattlesnake. Ironically, the beginning of the corrido states that Rey was already aware of Saint Toribio, and his superstition drove him to carry a holy card of Saint Toribio with him, even while committing abuses toward migrants. Fearing he would lose his life from the pain and fever of the venom, Rey is approached by a tall, dark figure who heals him. He describes the encounter as almost dreamlike. Like a select number of ghost smuggling ballads, this particular ballad includes video footage. The dramatic reenactment serves as powerful imagery, contributing to the effectiveness of the ballad. The corrido is performed in an autobiographical way. Its testimonial nature strengthened by the fact that the corridista, or the balladeer, performs the role of himself as the main coyote character in the video. The coyote character in this ballad embodies a stereotypical extortionary smuggler, or what sociologist Daniel E. Martinez defines as the border business coyote. Rey, the smuggler, admits that his job is very easy, as he simply collects money and then turns over each group of migrants to the corrupt band, who, as the corrido implies, either abuses the migrants or abandons them. The following clip shows the coyote writhing on the ground in agony after he's bitten by the rattlesnake. He admits to the listener that only a miracle can save him, and he remembers the holy card he had in his pocket, pleading to Saint Toribio to save him.
Salvarme de aquel infierno. Invoqué a Toribio Romo con todo mi corazón. Le pedí si me salvaba, de caballo esa labor.
At the end of El Cascabel, the coyote confesses that he's a changed man. As a result of his near-death experience, he now views his role as a smuggler very differently, more aligned to the mission of Saint Toribio Romo. The Holy Coyote, according to the corrido text, he now travels along the borderlands in search of migrants who are in danger and to help guide them away from dangerous smuggling rings who are waiting to prey on and extort them. Rather than abandoning migrants after securing payment, the coyote is abandoning his former way of life and his former alliances with corrupt smuggling rings, reconciling his devotion to Saint Toribio Romo. While other ghost smuggling ballads narrate the saving and healing of migrants themselves, this particular corrido reveals that the Holy Coyote also intercedes for and protects other coyotes. His intercession in this case marks a pivotal point of conversion, transcending a moral boundary parallel to the physical boundary the coyotes now help migrants cross. The smuggler is now a guide in the service of the undocumented migrant, as part of the migrant's pilgrimage to safety and to a better life. The Holy Coyote embraces the migrant and repentant smuggler alike as part of the sanctified migrant journey, one that, based on migrant devotion, is recognized by a divine power. As survivor testimony and survivors' music, ghost smuggling ballads describe migrants' traumatic experiences and miraculous escapes from exposure, dangerous situations, and even death. The lyrics not only explain to listeners that the corridista was spared from a tragic death, but that through Saint Toribio Romo were rescued, healed, and given the resources to continue their journey, including evading border patrol and other forms of immigration law enforcement. Many of these corridos' lyrical content is composed in an autobiographical format. Thus, the corridista or balladier's ability to sing and compose a ghost smuggling ballad provides further evidence that they, in fact, did survive the migrant journey, one that does not necessarily end as soon as the border is permeated. Rather, migrants will continue to survive exclusionary politics and discrimination on account of their immigration status. In recounting their survival experiences within the migrant listening community, migrants also express their devotion to Saint Toribio and make musical promises to return to a shrine in Jalisco when they are able. The last corrido that I want to present to you is probably not going to play because I can tell right now that the media isn't shared. So I just want to let you, and I included a bit of the text on there. This is one of the only corridos that shows the evidence of intertextuality. So as a literary technique within ghost smuggling ballads, survivor testimony, suggesting possible dialogue between the migrant corridistas on social media. This corrido refers to specific imagery and narratives found in the other ghost smuggling ballads I talked about, specifically Nueva Vida and Cascabel. The corrido is entitled Al Padre Toribio Romo and features a man named Juan Reynosa, who calls himself El Sensontle de Jalisco, or the Mockingbird of Jalisco, on his YouTube channel. The accompanying video shows Reynosa sitting with his guitar directly facing the camera as he recounts his story. He does not include any dramatic reenactment, but rather addresses the listener directly as if he were performing for them in a private setting or informally in their living room, not unlike a family member sharing a ghost story around a kitchen table. In conclusion, as a holy coyote, Saint Toribio Romo's identity transcends temporal boundaries, a cristero martyr of the past and an immigrant activist ghost of the present, whose posthumous mission is to care for, intercede for, and smuggle undocumented migrants into safety. Ghost smuggling ballads about and dedicated to the Holy Coyote depict migrants as victims of circumstance and beneficiaries of sacred protection, sanctifying the undocumented journey as one whose end goal defies governmental laws, similar to the defiance of anti-clerical laws during Saint Toribio Romo's life. This collective ghost story tells the tale of the unofficial patron saint of immigrants, whose patronage also extends to repentant coyotes, converting them to a new smuggling role as part of the migrant pilgrimage, which is only completed upon safe return back to Mexico. Ghost smuggling ballads function as a form of survivors' music, reinforcing the survivor testimony of other migrants and offering future migrants hope and a security that with the protection of Saint Toribio, their undocumented journey is legitimized, sanctified, and safeguarded. Thank you.
More of an observation. It was interesting to me. First of all, thank you. Fantastic paper, fantastic topic. What's interesting to me is how the encounters with Saint Toribio, to a certain extent, fly in the face of what some people conceive of as essential to an encounter with the saint. It's sort of that you have this preconceived notion that you're going to run into the saint along the way, or an apparition. But these, at least some of the earlier ones you're talking about, they don't know who the heck this guy is.
Yeah,
they first meet him and he introduces himself to him. I'm sure you go Romo. And they go back and they find him in Jalisco. Well, I think you do mention a couple of songs in there. I think someone says, I cry out, Saint Toribio. But it sounds like maybe there's an earlier a few years ago, earlier tradition, where it's people running into St. Teresito, they don't know who he is. And it's only after they go back to his hometown that they realize who he actually is. That's just totally fascinating.
Yeah, and that's I mean, even the original story was, so the original first migrant encounter was published in 2002, but the person who was talking about it, which is Jesus Buendia Gaitán, he was the one who had said, this actually happened to me in the 1980s, even though I'm telling you about it in 2002. And so there's like kind of no knowledge of like when the first narrative was circulating, but once people started to know who he was, that's exactly what you're right. That's when they started to compose ballads invoking him, knowing that he's out there to protect them.
I was kind of gonna ask that question too, like how far back that marriage goes, but actually, Alejandro was putting out one of those portraits was in front of his house in Chicago. So I was gonna ask,
Yes.
how far does this legend come into the US?
It's coming further and further. In fact, there are new churches that are being built and new chapels in name of Saint Toribio Romo. And there are immigration, like Catholic immigration charities that are invoking his name as well. And you'll find those portraits. So one of them was in Chicago and one of them was in Los Angeles. And so you're finding some of them there. Yes.
So Teresita gave a presentation in my class a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, and then students actually came and brought candles of Santo Toribio because they had shared the presentation or the conversation with their parents. And so they were saying like that the parent wanted to share the candle as a gift for like thinking to share that story.
So they definitely do extend quite far, and even Oklahoma and Georgia and like North Carolina now, so even further away from the border. It's really fascinating.
How official of a saint is he?
So he is officially canonized as a martyr of La Cristiada, in the sense that his feast day is in May, and it actually changed. When he was only beatified, his feast day was in February, and then it changed. So he is officially part of the I guess the collection, the communion of saints in the Catholic Church, but his patronage is not ascribed. And so, and neither are his migration miracles. In fact, his miracle to become a saint, I think, had to do with curing an illness and not necessarily with migrants. So it's kind of this combination of authorized sainthood and then folk sainthood, which is really fascinating. And it's really the folk sainthood that's driving his devotion rather than his official. Because some of the migrants who get saved don't even know anything about La Cristiada and don't know about his history. They just know him as that person. So thank you so much. And